I'm Robert McCready at Evening Magic on Twitter. Paul Leslie is a man known by two names, Paul Leslie. He's a husband, a son, a writer, an interviewer, has a podcast, had a radio show for a long time, had the privilege of that, a person who likes to eat, grills, has a lot of friends, and I am one of them in real life and on X, formerly known as Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you. What a sparkling introduction. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. So, where are you zooming us from, Paul Leslie?
The same state that you're in, the Palmetto State, South Carolina.
Oh, excellent. It feels good that you're in the same state. I like that. What are you drinking right now?
I wonder if I'm the first person on Evening Magic to drink coffee. It's like the most is that possible? It's coffee. This is French press coffee.
You are the first person, and coincidentally, because we have parallel lives, I am the second person to have coffee on Evening Magic.
But yours is iced.
It is iced. I'm in an iced coffee shtick for the past couple of weeks. So
It's a
that's
good way to
cool.
be.
All right, so you I kind of don't know where to start. I've got everything to say and nothing to say all at once. But we'll start with your show. I
Okay.
discovered it on YouTube, and I discovered it because of Natalie Goldberg. You've interviewed her a couple of times. But how did your show start?
Well, uh, the show started basically out of my love for a particular radio station was a lot of it. There's a radio station, it's still around, Radio Margaritaville. At the time, my main focus was on writing. I was writing, different articles and things. And I had written an article about a guy named Steve Huntington, and he was the program director for Radio Margaritaville, which, as a lot of people out there probably know, Jimmy Buffett's station. It was the first radio station that started online that transitioned into satellite radio. And I interviewed Steve, and I just thought he was the coolest guy. And I loved his station. I loved that he would play things beyond what you would think would be on Radio Margaritaville. It wouldn't just be music from the Caribbean. He would play, like I remember Steve playing Enya, and he would play like something from The Sound of Music. And I just thought, wow, this guy is able to be so eclectic on the radio. And I wanted to do it. And I had no experience, I had no equipment. I had never been on the radio except for one time as a call-in guest. And I had a demo that I sent my good friend Jeff Pike. We recorded this at his studio. It was the show then was called Time After Island Time. And I sent the demo away thinking that they would critique it and then take it from there. But they said instead, we aired it. Send us another one. And that got me on this path that we're on. And now I'm on Evening Magic, and I couldn't be more thrilled. But that's how the show started. It was my attempt to combine interviews with music. And that was the first, probably 15 years or so of my broadcasting was the marriage of music with the spoken word.
So you followed what you love, and it took you where you needed to go.
I like that take on it. Yes.
And this, you're doing it for 20 years now, 20 years this month,
Next month, yes.
next month, October.
Yeah. The first broadcast was October 13th, 2003 on Radio Margaritaville. Yep.
I know where I was then. I was a sophomore at Coker College, now Coker University. And I was probably in a theater class back then, and I was working as a resident assistant at the Governor's School for Science and Mathematics. So a lot of years ago now. Um, you're planning a tribute to yourself or a tribute to the show, 20-year anniversary. How's that going?
Well, that was, I wouldn't say it was a tribute to myself so much, but I guess the word that I would think of is like a commemorative thing to, you know, I don't want 20 years to pass and, not anything said about it. Like I want to somehow celebrate that milestone. But you had a great idea. You said, hey, what if you did like a very long live stream and you'd have these different guests? So it'd be like a 20-hour live stream or something like that. And Robert, you've busted me because I have not done anything lately with that. I just haven't. Um, so there you got me.
Well, I did volunteer to take part of the hours that no one else wanted, like early in the morning. And
Hmm.
I've been conditioning myself, and I usually condition myself right before I go to bed. And I thought, I'm gonna have to go to bed early that night so I can get up at like 3 a.m. and talk with Paul Leslie. And I'm still willing to do it. And I like our idea that we had for it. And even if you don't do the 20-hour live stream like you were planning, I think that it's important that everybody that might be watching right now to know that you are a tribute guy and that there is something going to happen for the 20-year mark. And we should all stay tuned to the Paul Leslie Hour on YouTube and everywhere.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. And sometimes I do need some kind of a, cajoling. So yeah, there will be something done.
What are some other tributes you've done in your life?
Oh, well, I like what you said, the tribute man, because I'm somebody that when something affects me, when I like something, I'm the guy that kind of like will frequently take it one step further or many steps further. I paid, I think, the ultimate tribute to a song. This was in 2010. I had, I don't know how long before, I had interviewed Fats Domino, one of the architects of rock and roll. And I was just very touched by his song, Walking to New Orleans. And so I decided that I was going to pay tribute to Fats Domino and that song. And I was going to walk from, I didn't know the origin where I would begin, but I would end in New Orleans. And so I did. I started in Florida. It was a 330-mile, I think, total trek over 16 days, which I don't recommend. And it was quite an experience. I mean, I didn't have any experience doing anything like that, but I planned each day so that each day I would have uh, like, okay, day one, I'll end here. Day two, I'll end here. And I bit off way more than I could chew, but I did, in fact, arrive in New Orleans. And it was one of those things like, everybody was asking me, like, what, I don't know why, but what does your family think about this? And then I got interviewed by the Times Picayune newspaper, great journalist named, I think his name was Ramon or Raymond. But anyways, he said, wow, your family must be so proud of you. And I said, no, they're not. They don't want me doing this. They were all saying, for the most part, they were all saying, don't do this. But
Families are always like that.
yeah, usually.
I think Jesus or one of the disciples said that prophets are never accepted in their hometown. And Madonna actually quoted that when she went to New York City, or she was in New York City, and she said, "I've been here long enough that this is like my hometown, and prophets are never appreciated in their hometown."
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. I mean, it, it, it's interesting also when you get to meet people and you meet the people around them, and it tends to be the people around whoever that person is are not impressed with that person. Sometimes it happens, but a lot of times it's like, you know, it's been funny to me when I would call people to do a radio interview. Like, I don't know how many people, this is going back a ways. He's still around, but there's a classic comedian, Shecky Green. And I thought of Shecky as being, I mean, we even call a comedian a Shecky. That's like a slang term. And I called him with like a little bit of reverence, thinking, oh, I'm calling one of the all-time greats in classic comedy. And you call him and his wife picks up. And you say, "Can I speak to Mr. Green?" And she puts the phone down like this and she yells, "Shaq!" And you hear him, "What? Shaq, the phone." And you always it's true. You always find that there's always one person. I'm sure that maybe at Paul McCartney's house, Paul McCartney's wife probably sometimes talks to him like that. you know?
Yeah, that's yeah, there's someone that's keeping it real, that's just not putting up all of that.
Right. Right.
And they kind of have that person kind of, they the celebrity that's in that relationship kind of respects that person,
Right.
because there's not many people once you achieve that level that you can be real with.
That's
All
true.
the celebrities kind of don't know how to handle each other in their relationship because they've talked about it in interviews. I think speaking of Paul McCartney's wife, I was thinking about his ex-wife, Heather Mills McCartney. That was the model, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that they were just kind of, combustible. It's just you think, oh, this person knows what I'm going through. I can make it work with them, and it just
Right.
becomes. I don't know what I would imagine as a power dynamic. I imagine they compete with each other. They imagine, what different entities would say about the other based on, how they're perceived, and it's not going to be equal. It's not going
Right.
to be like this equal, treatment, the way that Dolly Parton doesn't have to worry about what people might say about her and her husband, because her husband,
Right.
a non-entity as far as the media is concerned.
Yeah, Carl.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember watching the Dolly documentary. I think it was on Netflix. And there were people that had worked with her for decades and decades, and they were like, I saw Carl one time. It looked like he was getting groceries out of the car and he waved from a distance. And that was my experience with Dolly's husband.
That's cool that he's cool with having his wife be this like glittering jewel of kind of sex appeal and comedy,
Right.
and and that he was cool with it, when she was, at an age where people probably wanted her to do favors to get places, and who knows, what they went through. But even if you had a good woman, I think that it would be very scary, um, knowing that someone like Elvis Presley might be hitting on her. I think I just saw an interview or a clip recently where Harvey Weinstein invited Gwyneth Paltrow to his hotel room, and she told Brad about it, and Brad threatened him, and so she had her honor defended, but he had some power. Imagine if you didn't
Yeah.
have power and you were threatening someone that was, a millionaire 100 times over.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a stressful thing. How many people have you interviewed?
It's over 900 now. I would say if I had to guess, it'd probably be in the 970 range around there.
And does that correspond to the number of episodes that you have?
No. There's like a cache or a cachet, however you say it, of, I want to say about 50 or so that still need to be processed and go up and be released.
What's the best interview you ever did?
I think about this a lot, but my favorite interview would be Frank Sinatra Jr. That was just a phenomenal interview. It was like, I only did one with him, but when I was editing it, the man never said or any of those things. His brain was such a machine. It was like you could just mention anything. You couldn't trip Frank Sinatra Jr. up. And I wish I had been able to interview him again. I know that there were these fellows who did a movie podcast at some university, I think in California, and they ended up talking to him for like 5 hours. And he was a movie buff. And there were all these different sides to Frank Sinatra Jr. He was more than just a singer and Frank Sinatra's son. And they said it was just like you just named a topic, and he was just like, "Oh, that here, horror movies. Let me, And when I was talking to him, he went into movies just a little bit, but he was one of those people that maybe the world had a certain idea about who he was, and he was somebody else. But I go back to that one over and over again because he was such an inspiring person to me and so interesting. He was what you were always looking for in an interview. And that is you as the interviewer, and you knew that the listeners were also completely lost in what he was saying. And that would probably be my all-time favorite.
What interview are you most proud of?
Which one am I most proud of? Gosh. Hmm. That's tough because there's so many that I am proud of, but I'm really, really proud of the one that I did with Gene Wilder because I stayed true to how I wanted to do it. And a lot of people would say maybe that was a failure on my part because I didn't think about how most people thought of Gene Wilder as an actor and not a writer. And I went totally in the direction of writing. I think I asked like one question about movies, but that was something I was proud of it because it was what I wanted to do. And I didn't necessarily listen to what would make it more successful. I think relative to Gene Wilder's fame, it hasn't done that well, but it's still done well. Don't get me wrong. But that's one that comes to mind for sure. I was very proud of the one I did with Woody Allen, and that was kind of the same deal. I was just totally absorbed with one topic. But I'm proud of a lot of them. I can think of people that I pursued and pursued and pursued, and I never was able to get a hold of them, or I wasn't able to do it. And then I finally got the interview, and that was, it was extra, it was like, okay, at last.
I was on a walk this morning and I was thinking about the Gene Wilder interview. That interview lives inside of me now.
Oh, thank you, Robert.
It's really good. And I was thinking about, I think he said something like, I'm just excited to see what's going to happen every day when he was
Yeah.
writing. I think he said something like that. And I was just kind of trying to enjoy why I liked hearing him talk about writing. And I think that he talked about it in a mystical way, in a way that it seemed a little bit like magic, and his life seemed a little bit like magic. Like he talked about cooking pasta with his wife in the interview,
Yeah.
and it was just very casual,
Yeah, it was.
and I really enjoyed that. And to tell you the truth, um, I don't have a lot of experience with Gene Wilder as an actor. I know he was in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I know that he was in that movie when he was Frankenstein. I can't remember the name of it,
Young
unfortunately.
Frankenstein.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and and he just kind of was a scary figure to me as a kid.
Hmm.
Um, I just didn't understand his hair, and he had these big eyes. His intensity was not
Yeah.
charming to me as a kid. But hearing that interview, it showed another side of him, and I feel a little bit more generous in
Hmm.
the aspects that you know kind of repelled me before. And I'm curious about his books. I've listened to the interview a couple of times. I'm curious about his writing process. I'm curious. I want to be a fly on the wall in his house.
Hmm.
It opened up a whole new thing, a whole new world for me about this person. And I was it's just a great interview. And all of your interviews are great because of the way you'll ask a question that I didn't think that I even wanted to know the answer to. And you get
Hmm.
people to talk in a way that I had never heard them speak before, like Natalie Goldberg.
Yeah.
The first time I listened to it was 2019.
Hmm.
It was the
Hmm.
spring of 2019 or the winter term, maybe February. And I heard the first interview that you did.
Yeah.
And she would what was remarkable about that interview is that you'd ask a really great question. I was like, oh wow, that's a really great question. Then Natalie Goldberg would say, wow, that was a really great question.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, and that made it entertaining. And
Yeah.
so um and I kind of listening to your interviews made that started me wanting to interview on my channel because I'd had a little channel and then I did things during the pandemic and I always thought maybe one day I'm going to start interviewing people. I hope that I'm as good as the Paul Leslie Hour.
Oh, Robert, thank you.
My
That's very
pleasure.
kind.
So let's talk about Natalie Goldberg.
Let's do it.
um,
Absolutely.
I like Natalie Goldberg. I've actually got two of the same book of hers here. She wrote Writing Down the Bones.
Yes.
And I don't remember how I found the book. I might have had a book called The Weekend Novelist. And in that book, he recommends Writing on the Bones. But I saw it at Barnes and Noble, and I don't remember thinking someone told me to get this. And I opened it, and I thought, freeing the writer within. I need to be freed.
Yeah.
I need this. And so I took it home and I read it. And I thought, and I read the whole thing. It was one summer, maybe 2010. And then during NaNoWriMo of 2011, I think it was 2011, or maybe it was late 2010, um, I started looking up Natalie Goldberg on YouTube. The internet was still kind of growing, and you kind of didn't know what all you could put into a search engine. You kind of just we were using search engines for reports. We weren't
Yeah.
using it for daily life. And I think I searched Natalie Goldberg and I found a little clip of her doing an interview. I thought she was cool and I would post it to Facebook, and that's all I would do. And every once in a while I'd just go back and look for new interviews. And then I would read more of her books, and then I found her interview, and then I got to just see an insight into her life that I'd never seen before. What was your experience with Natalie Goldberg?
Well, first of all, I should tell you, Robert, that the very first interview, I don't know if anybody can see this. I got up this morning and I started listening to it. Yes, I sometimes listen to my own interviews, especially the Natalie Goldberg ones. She was just such a thrill to talk to, and it's so entertaining to hear her speak. So, you know, it's kind of funny you mentioned that first interview because I end up listening to it today. My experience with her began, a friend of mine, Jason Burge, he had like a back room, and he was letting out a room to another friend of mine, Wesley. And I was over there all the time. I was like kind of like the third roommate, but not really. I like there would be sometimes, and I can't really explain why this would be, but like I would spend days on end at their house. So like the back bedroom, sometimes jokingly they would say something like, "Which room?" Like, are you talking about Paul's room? Even though I didn't live there. But Jason is a big reader and writer. And in that back room, he had these different books. And there was a copy of Writing Down the Bones sitting by the bed on, like, I guess the nightstand or whatever. And I picked it up. I was very intrigued by it. And there was something about it. I I had this idea that writing in and of itself was interesting. Like, it's writing about writing is its own thing. Books about writing is a kind of genre, as you know. And I thought, I've been looking for this my whole life. Look at this book. And I started flipping through it, and I started reading it, and I found you could turn to any chapter, and totally independent of the rest of the book, you could get swept into that one chapter and read it, think about it, do whatever it was in that chapter if you so chose, and then you'd want to read the next chapter. And I took that book out of that bedroom. And so we would be in the living room, and there would maybe be a party or something, and people would be drinking and there'd be music playing. And I would just be like in the corner reading the Natalie Goldberg Writing Down the Bones book. And I remember Jason a few times, he would say something, like, he started to get annoying to him. He would say something like, "Would you like to be left alone with your book?" Or like, and then he saw me reading it so many times that at a certain point he said something like, "Would you like to just have that book? I'll give it to you," that kind of thing. Like, just, you've stolen, for all intents, you've stolen my book. And I eventually bought my own copy of it. But it put me down this kind of, I guess, path, so to speak. I became a Natalie Goldberg fan. And I liked the idea, just like the subtitle of the book, Freeing the Writer Within. She gives you permission to be a writer. It's like that's such a daunting title for a lot of people. And I know she's probably upset that we're talking so much about that book because she's written so many others. But but that, like she said in that interview, she said sometimes people go on and on about it so much. She says, I want to go back and read it and find out, well, why is everybody talking about this book? But there's others,
What's
I've got
in here?
yeah, what's in here? Yeah. But she's somebody who, she talks about not censoring. Like, don't censor what you write. And there have been times where I've been guilty of this, where I write something and it could be the most mundane thing. It could be, you know, well, I don't know. Is anything really mundane that you write? Uh, but I could be writing the introduction for one of my shows. And maybe I think someone would be offended by it. That's less and less the case now. But I'll think, like, should I really say that word? Or maybe, uh, you know, maybe I didn't hate this. Maybe I should change it to I didn't care for it. And Natalie is all about, like, probably your first gut instinct, what you would have written if you were trying to write fast, if you were going to be keeping the pen moving. That was probably actually the word that you wanted to use. And that's probably the one that'll have the most emotional or cerebral reaction from your reader. And so, that's something that's wonderful that Natalie Goldberg does. And I don't see her as the type of person who is going to change. You know, I think she's pretty much, she's saying what she thinks. She's writing what she thinks.
Um, I was looking through, I've taken notes in both books, and I'm being a little OCD because I'm like, oh, now I've got notes in two different copies.
Mhm.
But I wanted to get the 30th anniversary edition because she had
Right.
an introduction. But I was looking through the old one, and because I'm so OCD, and I'm going to take the notes that I wrote in this one, I'm going to put them into the original one because I took notes in chapters, but I took
Right.
notes more than a decade apart, underlined different
Wow.
things. But what you said about just being a writer, she said on page 132, the last sentence, the last two sentences is let go completely. Let yourself totally be a writer from now on.
Yeah.
I love that. And she ended the sentence with a preposition.
Yeah.
She's not even a southerner. You go, girl. That's a preposition.
uh,
Um, and then the then in the new copy, I underlined on page 174, and this is what you were going to say about hate or don't care for. Don't change words because in this practice, you are deepening your ability to trust your own voice. If you were truly present when you wrote, it will be there whole.
hmm. Yeah. Yeah. She's telling you, don't lie.
Don't lie. And what she said in that first interview with you, you asked her about voice, and she said, I never worry about that. I just
Hmm.
use my ordinary speaking voice or ordinary
Yeah.
talking voice.
Yeah.
And that was mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've had people who have told me something like, oh, I can't write, or, and I'm happy to help people when I can, but like people would say, I need to write a very, very strongly worded letter so that I can get this certain thing resolved. I'm not getting any help here, but I just don't know where to begin. And I always have said to people, like, this wasn't long ago, someone was in this exact situation. And I said, what you're going to do is you're going to tell me what happened, but me is actually going to be a piece of paper and you're going to use a pen. And anything that you would say, you're also going to write on the paper. That's how you do it. I was like, you already know how. Oh, but you know how. You absolutely, if you can talk, you can write. Pretty much all the time. That's true. And Natalie Goldberg does a service in that she's not telling people like, this is the threshold that you have to pass if you're going to be a writer. And I like that. I like that, it's something that there's different types of writers. There's people who write professionally, and then there's people who can write really, really brilliant things or very touching things that don't get paid a dime for it. And then there's mixes of those things, people who they are doing copywriting by day and then by night they're writing this other stuff. And there's a great songwriter that I've interviewed a few times, Amanda Colleen Williams. And I asked her one time, like, is the art of songwriting, is it something that is like a blessing that some people have? And she said, I don't identify with that at all. I think anybody can write songs, which, I mean, you want to talk about like startling. It's startling in a way that Natalie Goldberg and some others have said that everybody can write, but also somebody who could say, no, I think everybody could write songs. That's pretty. In a way, it's like inspiring, but also it's a totally different way of looking at things. And I do think that maybe everybody can write songs, and then there are some people who are really, really gifted at it. Same thing with writing. Everybody writes, to borrow the title of Anne Handley's book. But then there's certain people, they're either Ernest Hemingway or they're Bob Dylan or something, and they're just really, really gifted. But to whoever is listening or watching out there, gifted is totally a subjective thing. You some people don't like Bob Dylan, and there might be people who really, really love what you have to write if you would put it out there. So don't be intimidated.
Definitely. And I know that you and I have talked a little bit about the manufactured feel of books, of songs, even of
Mm,
movies. And I know I want to see something I've never heard of. Now,
yeah,
I'm tired of, Colleen Hoover. I'm tired of these, manufactured authors that are just putting out something so that someone can read on a beach, that the beach reads trend.
yeah,
No, like you need to be crying on the beach from a
yeah,
book, and not a good cry, but like this is a torturous thing, like I want art. I don't want just candy. I've got enough candy. And we won't know about the new independent cool thing if people aren't putting it out there en masse so that we can, inundate the market and, perhaps see it. And I want um that because it's interesting, and you might find one book by someone that you love, and maybe everything else they write just doesn't hit the way that one thing does.
yeah.
That would be fantastic, because Natalie Goldberg is famous for one book.
Hmm.
Sorry, she's famous for one book,
Right,
but she's written, I think, going on 17 or 18 books since.
right,
And you and I are reading them, and then
right,
your wife is reading them,
right.
and we make our friends read them, um,
Yep,
and we keep up with it, and that's a cool thing. Bob Dylan had hits in the 60s,
right.
in the 70s, and beyond, but you can't listen to him on the radio today.
No.
When's the last time that he had a charting song?
I think that the one time that I might be mixing different facts, but like when he came out during the whole COVID era thing, he came out with that song. It was just unexpected, murder most foul. I don't know if that charted, but it was just like it was unexpected because it was, I want to say, some kind of like first time he went to a number one or something like that. But other than that, yeah, you're right in that Bob Dylan, for a lot of people, they don't even have any concept of the idea that he still has made records all these years, which is kind of crazy, but you know,
And it's really cool. And he won the Nobel Prize in
yeah,
literature, and he inspired a movie called
yeah,
Life Itself, and they kept on talking about, I think it was Time Out of Mind.
yeah,
They kept on talking about that one song, Make You Feel My Love. Is that from Time Out of Mind?
yes, yeah,
um he inspired a whole movie, and you can't do that. Like, no one is going to make a movie where they talk about a Colleen Hoover book unless they make a movie based on her book, and the title of the book is the title of the movie that they say in the movie.
yeah, yeah.
You're not gonna, wax philosophical about it. And I hate to like be on Colleen Hoover like that, but that's just, I read Verity, and I bought it from Target, and I put it in that small library for someone else to have. I let someone at work read it. Like, I did my duty, but I'm not going to do it anymore. Not unless she gets canceled and can only get published by an independent press, and then I'm going to be a Colleen Hoover fan like nobody's business.
Because you're anti-canceling.
Yeah, well, I think I'm anti-canceling, but I think the people that survive the cancellation are doing something so good that it
Yeah.
can't not be out there.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Like Joseph Massey or Rachel Custer, their work is so good it cuts through all of the billions of dollars of media that are
Right.
trying to cram TikTok down our throats. And then it's like, oh, Rachel Custer, she's got this great book of poems.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you have to say about that. And it's true. There are certain artists that what they've done, it's like, whether it's true or not, the quality and the need for it to exist in this world is so great that it's like, well, we'll forgive that. You did, and a lot of people might say, well, that's wrong. But, you know, like, if we found out something about Leonardo da Vinci that, like, wow, can you believe he did this? Whatever it is, hypothetically speaking, it would not in any, like, we're not going to destroy his art from here on. Although there probably would, in this crazy time we're in, there probably would be people that would say Da Vinci needs to be canceled. Like, you know,
Don't look at this.
right. Don't look. Exactly. Yeah.
And
But
in Da Vinci's life, he was, practically canceled when he was living, and he had to live in exile. Um, you know, they tried to do it then, and they would probably try to do it again. But Da Vinci was such a rare person,
yeah,
and he produced things that led to medical discoveries. He produced things that led to the invention of the airplane, like his drawings, because he could see the way the birds' wings moved as they flew. Like
right.
his body was just specially conditioned to do that. And if we deprive the world of what he did because of him,
Right.
then we're denying the world the best thing
Yeah.
because of like one person's actions. You can't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, world, you can't have the very best thing because we don't like the person that did this." Like,
Right.
like what Bach did was the best. He's the best. We can't not have the best because he was bad.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the thing about our times today is that in many cases, it's a double insult to humanity, because first of all, the person's work is so good, we have to have it, we need their work, we love it, and it's good for us, it's edifying, or it's, even if it's just entertaining. But then it's double insulting, because a lot of times it's like, okay, so what did this person do? Nothing, in my opinion. It's like, nothing really. Like, this you know the number one thing that I think you can do, that's the best and worst thing that you can do, uh for two different reasons, is not back down. It's the best thing because it's the right thing to do. It's it's really the only thing that you can do in a certain sense. But it's the worst only in that, I mean, I don't even know if I'm sure about that, because it's the worst because if you don't back down, you will be destroyed. But at the same time, I think about people who have apologized or whatever, and they were eaten alive too. So, you know, I I like what Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports said. And a couple of people have said this: I'm uncancelable. And I think there's some truth in that. If you don't allow yourself, now I'm contradicting myself, but if you don't allow yourself to be savaged by the cancel mob, you probably won't be.
I said a couple of years ago that I could not be canceled. And they were like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I could still just work at the Piggly Wiggly."
Yeah.
I don't have anything. You're going to cancel me. And
Right.
like, and also now that I've gotten older, if I do get fame and riches, I'm old
Hmm.
enough now that my ego isn't in that anymore. Like
Right.
if you're younger in your 20s and you kind of like got a taste of things, and or you've had
Yeah.
60 years to build up something. Well, not even then, because Woody Allen is kind of canceled, but I think he's perfectly happy.
Yeah.
He kind of was always rejecting the accolades. Like he paid the Academy to quit offering him a membership. And then when they were revoking everyone's membership, they couldn't revoke Woody Allen's membership because he was never a member. So
Right.
he never got in that. So, I think I'm old enough now that I wouldn't think, oh, look at all this stuff I've got now. This is who I am. Um, Whereas, if I was 20 and had a mansion and fame and then lost it,
Right.
that would hurt more. But I just, I've seen people around me lose it all. We're in a time where it feels like you could lose it all at any moment.
Yeah.
And, um, so I think that, that's a little bit better now. But, there's lots of options. People at Piggly Wiggly don't know the mean thing you said on Twitter.
Right.
People, homeless people, we don't know the bad things that they're saying on social media because they got phones. I've seen them.
Yeah.
They're not suspicious people, but they can't be canceled. So
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
off the street. Oh, you hate homeless people? Like you can't. There's nowhere else you can go. So I can't be canceled either.
No. No. I
In
mean,
fact, if they were to try, it would probably only help. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, and that's if I'm looking at myself, accurately and truthfully, uh, there's not much to cancel, and there's no like empire or anything that like there's never going to be a magazine article, at least in the present time, like the unraveling and canceling of Paul Leslie, because most people don't know who I am, which is probably more of a blessing than a curse.
well, thank God that you've done so many things like your tribute walk. You've done things like that make it. You kind of outweighed the good and some of the bad that you might be planning to do.
Yeah.
This one thing. Um, I hope you don't get canceled, and I hope that some of the friends that you've made through your interviews will be there to support you. Um, about some of the interviews,
Huh?
who do you want to interview?
Who do I want to interview that I haven't?
Yes. Well, I wrote it just who do you want to interview, and you can interpret that however you'd like.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's certain people that are dreams of mine that it would be phenomenal to interview them. And the first one that comes to my mind is Bob Dylan. That would be, I mean, I have all of his albums. I've listened to them more and more and more, and he's just a source of endless fascination for me. So he's on there. I there's like a lot of people that I want to interview yet again. Like I want to interview Natalie Goldberg again. Uh, my friend Peter Mayer, who I've interviewed now, I think like 7 times. I'm already thinking about like the next time I do an interview with Peter. I want to interview you, Robert McCready. I want to interview, uh, you know, Tucker Carlson would be a great person to sit down and talk about music with. Um, yeah, those are there's really, it's funny. I did that interview which you were very much a part of with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And you know, I don't agree with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on everything, but it was such an interesting experience. And I feel like there's so many things we can learn from RFK Jr. I'm thinking about other people that I wouldn't normally think about interviewing, but I would really want to interview, like Cornel West. I'd like to talk to him. So, it, I could probably even think of more, but yeah, I think that next year I'm probably going to slow down in my interviews because I've been going so hard. It's been 20 years now, and I see myself slowing down with it, but I'm still excited at the next one. Like it's always energizing to think about, like getting a hold of someone and being able to ask them pretty much whatever you want. You know this thrill through Evening Magic. It's you when you discover interviewing, you start to feel of it like it's some kind of secret that not everybody knows about.
I think definitely the good ones. A
Yeah,
lot of Americans are probably used to seeing this controversial lightning rod figure is going to be on this show, and they're just going to be embattled when they get
right.
on the show, and they're going to defend themselves like a fight. And I'm not interested in that.
Yeah,
You've seen it once, you've seen it all. Um,
right.
we collectively hate this person, and this person is going to be the designated gladiator to take them down. Is
Yeah.
mm, I mean, it's not interesting. If the
Right.
person is interesting that they're interviewing, I'll watch that. How many times can you watch a beatdown from Sean Hannity?
Right.
um,
Right. Yeah.
and there's just, people are more than just those things. I remember, I can't remember his name, but his brother went on Piers Morgan to defend him after he got in trouble during a very controversial case one summer. And his brother was extremely prepared.
Huh.
I wish I could remember the name. Um, but his brother, just everything that I'm sure if people Google Piers Morgan brother interview, it would pop up. I can't remember, but Piers Morgan would give him the gotcha line, and then he would just reframe it and say, "No, I think this is the case, and this is now the answer that I'm giving you." It was just remarkable, and I that's the first time I thought, "Wow, this is what if we let people say this stuff." Maybe more would happen. And I remember when I did interviews for a magazine, and that was different than video, but because I feel like you got to ask questions in a bunch of different ways and you didn't have to worry about what people were listening to. But I interviewed Ken Ard, who resigned as the lieutenant governor of South Carolina because of some controversies. And I was just like, so, like, what happened? Like, what do we need to know? And he just kind of explained it in a very simple, easy way, and I don't understand why he would have to have resigned for it. Is no big deal, um, and that's far more interesting to me than just getting a narrative ramped
Mm-hmm.
over and over.
Right.
Um, Now this question is very specific, and I was thinking about Jimmy Buffett, whom you've interviewed.
No, I've never interviewed Jimmy Buffett.
You've never interviewed, okay, but
No.
you did a review or something that he reposted.
Oh yeah, yeah. Or I guess probably his team. Over the last few years, they've shared quite a few of my reviews and interviews.
Okay, you never. I'm sorry that you didn't get to. R.I.P.
Yeah.
Jimmy Buffett. I loved your reviews, like the top whatever most underrated Jimmy
Yeah.
that have from the '80s and stuff. Those were
Thank you.
brilliant. But he kind of inspired this question: what person who has died do you wish you could have interviewed?
Well, just because he died days ago, it would probably be Jimmy Buffett. I mean, that was the beginning of my broadcasting through his empire. Uh, I really would have liked to have talked to him for sure. I had some questions, and I know there were people around him, including people on his, like on his management team that wanted him to do it. There was somebody that I was talking to who had been friends with him for like forever, and I showed him some of the questions I wanted to ask, which I let sit there for a while. Like I think I wrote some questions down in 2010, and he said like these questions are great. this would be awesome. And then I showed the questions to another person who'd known him for even longer, and he was saying, wow, that would be amazing if you could do that. This would be so unexpected. It would be off the beaten path. So for sure, I would have loved to have talked to Jimmy Buffett, and I'm more than anything, I'm sorry that he's passed away. And he is one of those people, like, we weren't friends or anything, but how different my life must have been if I hadn't been a part of Radio Margaritaville. I can't even imagine, because it was like that happened, and then I went on, and of course I went on other stations, but it was like that happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this, and uh, Jimmy Buffett connected me to so many people. My first celebrity interview was Jeff Bridges, and in a lot of ways, I got a hold of Jeff Bridges in a way because they were friends for so long. And at that time, I was on Jimmy's station, and it was like, for Jeff Bridges, it was like, oh, well, this is you know, my pal Jimmy Buffett station, and this guy Paul is playing my music. Jeff Bridges also makes some really good music, but he would be on there. And then I can think of a lot of the other architects of rock and roll. Like, I would have loved to have talked to Jerry Lee Lewis, who also just passed away. And that would have been, it's weird because I never met Jerry Lee Lewis. And I think about Jerry Lee Lewis probably like every other day. I think about the fact that he's gone. And then there's other people, like Little Richard. I would have loved to have talked to him. I've seen interviews with him. He was so entertaining. Yeah, those are the kinds of people. We lost so many people over the last year. I, I've been thinking about that a lot. Sinead O'Connor, Gordon Lightfoot, who I did get to interview a couple times, Jerry Lee Lewis, Tony Bennett, Tina Turner. We lost all these people, real icons. Harry Belafonte. We lost all these people some of these just recently.
And there's no one that is ready to take their place.
No.
Is there Billie Eilish?
No, no, no. I mean, when I think about Jimmy Buffett, for example, the likes of him we'll never see again. There will never be an artist like that. I just don't see how that's possible. There will definitely never be a Jerry Lee Lewis. No way. Like that was, and my whole thing with a lot of these people passing, like, I saw one of Tony Bennett's last concerts, like maybe not one of the last, but like within the last year of his performances. And I'm so glad I went to that show. It was February 14th, 2020, Valentine's Day, at Atlanta Symphony Hall. And then I think maybe it was maybe a year, maybe I'm wrong, after that, and he was done touring. And when these people like that are gone, they're gone. They're going to come out with some kind of hologram thing, which I have no interest in. For a lot of these people, like where you could see Elvis Presley or, whoever. You could maybe see the Beatles one day. I don't want to see that. Yeah, I don't want to see that. But it's been a reminder to me, like, go and see the people. Like, I want to see Mark Knopfler. I've never seen a Mark Knopfler concert. I want to see Brian Ferry. I've never seen him in concert. I want to see a lot of people. Like, they're, now I'm thinking, like, no, you really need to see them, preferably multiple times. It's always a good thing to go out and, it's like a kind of like a primal gathering in some ways. It's like you think about how in olden times people would be like banging on a tribal drum or maybe chanting or whatever. that's still within us in the concert, you know. So, you know, we were texting the other day and you were saying, I want to see Dylan. And I was thinking like, yes, go see Bob Dylan. You know, I'm hopeful he'll be with us for a lot longer. But, you know, whoever it is that you're thinking about seeing, go and see them.
I think everybody should see Dylan, and I have not even seen him, but
Yeah.
he's probably, the last of that great era, and he's carried on his whole life. He just kept on doing his thing. And once he's gone, there'll never be another Bob Dylan in our lifetime.
Mm-mm.
The only way is if America gets completely destroyed and we start out with nothing again, and then someone that organic can pop up
Mm.
and go on tour, and they're in the little caravan. And and we don't want that to happen just to get some good music. So go see the good music now.
Go see them while you can. Yes.
What is one of the questions you would have liked to have asked Jimmy Buffett?
You know, there's a lot of them, but I will tell you what I was gonna. My last question was going to be to him. I never wrote this down, but I knew I was going to say to him, Jimmy, do you have any idea what you mean to people? That was going to be my last question. And, you know, I think he did know, but, you know, he brought so much joy to people. And, you know, like I was reading this guy that I interviewed, Ryan White. He wrote a book about Buffett. And he was saying, like, there's a lot of people, they've made fun of Jimmy Buffett through the years because he's kind of like stereotypically what you would think of a person working a corporate job would like. And it's true. Like a lot of people who are supposedly, you know, working the 40, 50 hours a week, or maybe they're in a cubicle or whatever. Jimmy Buffett's appealing because he's the guy who's got tons and tons of stamps on his passport, and he's telling you, no, you should be in the south of France right now, or no, 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 you know, you're this week you're in Timbuktu, and next week you're in Havana. You know, that was like his life was so full of adventure that for somebody who is stuck in an air conditioned office with fluorescent light, Jimmy Buffett's life seems appealing, you know. And so a lot of people have made fun of Buffett fans through the years, but this guy Ryan White, he made the point in his obituary that, like, hey, that life of making a living, any kind of living, it's really hard, you know, and like there's nothing wrong with escapism. There's nothing wrong with listening to a song and taking a, you know, a little journey. And so, you know, that's what I would have wanted to ask him. I think last, and that sounds like a kind of, I don't know, maybe overly sentimental question, but I really would have liked to have known what he would say to that. I would. And there's other things like, you know, I would have wanted to know what he thought people would be saying about him in 100 years, because I think people will be saying stuff about him in 100 years. And that's curious. What would he think? Is that something he's even thought about? Something tells me maybe he hasn't thought about that, or he'd never thought about that. But there's a couple.
Paul, we're at that time of the show where you always let the guest have the microphone to say whatever he wants to say for the world, which will probably be time capsuled for all of time. So, knowing that, Paul Leslie, I'm going to give you the microphone to say whatever it is you want to say, knowing that it will probably reach people that have not even been born yet.
I think what occurs to me first is go on the adventure, whatever it is. And no matter what the odds might be, you know, there have been times where I've made an irresponsible choice. I shouldn't have gone and done this certain thing. Like practicality, from a practical standpoint, it didn't make sense. But, there was a friend of mine, he made a big impression on me. He passed away. His name was Monty Toller. And whenever I think about Monty and I think about his life and what he conveyed to people and what he lived his life like, it was like, do it no matter what it is. Like one time I remember I was telling Monty, I was telling him I was feeling the blues about something, and it was a Saturday. And he was like, I'll be right over. And he pulled up in his car and he was like, get in. And we went, we went in his car to go see a band at a bar. And he made it into an adventure. And so I would just say, go to the show. And the show means literally the show. And it also means whatever that thing is. Go to the poetry reading, if that's your thing. Do it rather than say it, go to meet with people. We have increasingly, people are living such isolated lives, and there's such an incredible gift that we have when we come together. I mean, you and I, just to tell all the viewers out there have been times where I've been in that room or right next to it at your house, and we've ended up talking, and we would think, okay, we'll talk for like an hour, and it was 4 or 5 hours. And I know I'm kind of droning on here with this answer, but I just want to tell one little story. Back when everything was locked down with all the COVID stuff, it was like the very first day that I had gone out of the house, and, everybody was, what did they call it even? Sheltering in place was what they called it. And I went to Whole Foods, and everybody was acting so afraid of one another, like everybody. And I went to Whole Foods, and I was looking at these different kombuchas in the refrigerated case. And this guy walks up to me, a young guy. He looked like Jimi Hendrix. He was a young black hippie. And he walks up to me, and it was startling that somebody was that close to me, because it'd been so long since somebody other than a family member was close to me. And he said, that one's really good. It's really good. But check out this one. He said, this one will give you a boost. And we were like looking at each other, and I was like realizing I haven't seen another human being up close and talk to them. And I don't know what it was, but it gave me like a rush of dopamine. I was elated to be talking to another person. We need each other. And so, again, going along with my thing, go to the show. It's like we need each other. And that's one of the reasons we go to the show. It's not just to see the music, to see the event, to watch the comedian on stage. It's also so that we can be together.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Robert. You were wonderful. You really are. And not just for this show. You are such a light in this world. And I love watching this show. I mean, you see me all the time on Twitter. I'm always tweeting, and I'm so honored that I was in the first 10 guests.
Me too. And I think you're the same. You're fun on Twitter, and you're fun in real life, and you always have new information, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.